Welcome back to campus. We're so excited to have you here to celebrate 50 years of interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary engineering with us. After so many years, the Division of Interdisciplinary Engineering Studies may be a little different than you remember. For one, the program you remember is now called the Interdisciplinary Engineering Studies degree program and resides within the School of Engineering Education. Since this major shift in 2004, we've been growing and changing in some exciting ways. So what does being an IDE mean today?
So today, IDES is an alternative pathway for students who are interested in pursuing, say, a professional degree outside of an engineering degree. So it's for students who have looked at their options for, say, pre-med or pre-law and said, I still think having that engineering background will give me a competitive advantage, and I want to do that.
You may have heard about the addition of our Multidisciplinary Engineering degree program that began in 2004. For those of you here who earned a BSc IDE degree and have been practicing engineering, you would have likely earned an MDE degree if it were around then. Let's hear from some of our current MDE students.
It is a way for me to be able to combine my love of art and STEM and be able to pursue engineering in a career that I'm passionate about.
I'm in multidisciplinary engineering with a concentration in theater engineering.
I'm studying acoustical engineering
and engineering management.
General engineering with a minor in management.
I really struggled to find a good discipline for me. I started in a different place than I was. And so then I looked around and found theater engineering, and it really fit who I was and what I wanted to do throughout my engineering career.
Big group of students, some of them who have a very specific idea of what they want to do, and some that have a very crazy idea of what they want to do, but no matter what it is, you combine engineering with something else and we can make it work.
The Nest is an awesome spot where students get to come and relax, first of all, regroup if necessary, make connections with their friends, work on homework, celebrate, hopefully, and just find a community.
Today, our programs are full of students who are excited to study engineering disciplines in the ways that work for them. We continue to blaze our own trail, but not without the help of our amazing faculty and staff.
Faculty are really amazing, and it's really great to have an experience at such a big school with faculty who really know you personally.
They are most of the reason why I decided to come to IDE and why I feel like this is the place where I belong and the place that I'm going to stay and graduate.
We've been told that back in the day, students joked that IDE stood for I'll decide eventually. But that's ridiculous. It actually stands for
Interestingly Designed Engineers.
Make daring endeavors.
Make delicious eggplant.
My destiny explored.
It's my dearest engineers.
Mitch Daniels enthusiasts.
In any case, we're proud to call ourselves IDE students, and we're so happy to have you back on campus so we can all celebrate our history together.
We are IDE.
We are MDE.
We are IDE. We are MDE.
We are IDE.
We are MDE.
We are IDE.
We are IDE.
All right, good. That always makes me emotional. I'm sorry. I'm a little teary. It gets me going. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our 8th Interdisciplinary Engineering Colloquium hosted by the School of Engineering Education. I'm Donna Riley. I'm the Kamyar Hagigi head of the School of Engineering Education. And we are home to the Interdisciplinary Engineering Studies and Multidisciplinary Engineering degree programs. Yay. First year engineering.
Yay.
Yay, yes. Our graduate program. I see a bunch of y'all here. And the Inspire Research Institute for Pre-College Engineering. I know there's Inspire people here too. All right. And I'm very pleased to welcome you to the 2020 Colloquium entitled Bumper to Bumper Engineering, Multidisciplinary Engineering in the Automotive Industry. And I see some of you are standing. We got standing room only. If you have a seat next to you that you think is free, and if anybody wants to sit, please feel free to come up. If you're fine where you are, that's fine too. No pressure. Okay. There's a couple seats if you want them. Excellent. Yeah, there's there's one more there, and one over there. Great, awesome, cool. So before we get started, I want to take just a moment to recognize and acknowledge a very important alumnus and his family without whom this event would not be possible. Professor Bruce Johnson, a Purdue alumnus, has very generously provided the funds for graduate education in the School of Engineering Education, which also helps to fund this annual interdisciplinary colloquium. Professor Johnson earned a master's degree and a PhD in mechanical engineering from Purdue. He's a professor emeritus of the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. And unfortunately, we lost both Bruce and his wife, Dot, since our last colloquium. So we'd like to make today's colloquium a tribute to the vision and dedication of Professor Johnson and his family, to IDE, to engineering education, and to the greater Purdue family. Ever grateful, ever true. I'd also like to acknowledge our 2020 outstanding alumni of the School of Engineering Education and their guests who are visiting us for our annual awards banquet that will take place later this evening. There are also many current students in the audience, including FYE students. Maybe not. Any FYE students? FYE alumni? Hey, that's right. MDE and IDES students in the IDE 301 class. 301 class represent, excellent. And our engineering ed grad students. I know you're all over this room, I see you. We welcome all of you here, and we look forward to taking your questions later in the colloquium. All right, so now it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Mary Pilotte, today's moderator. Dr. Pilotte is the Director of Engineering Education undergraduate degree programs and is an Associate Professor of Engineering Practice. She brings with her a deep history in the automotive industry, having worked as plant manager for a just-in-time automotive supplier, and she will no doubt lead an interesting conversation with our recent alumni who share a common path. So take it away, Mary.
Great, thank you, and welcome everyone. Hey, thank you for saying hi back. That's a good start, right? We thank you for spending this afternoon with us. I know some of you were encouraged to visit us, so thank you for being encouraged to visit us. The format of the colloquium is really pretty straightforward. What we'll do is I'll introduce our panelists. They'll have an opportunity to share a little bit about their background, and then we will move into a discussion. And then after we've had some prepared questions, what we'll do is open it up to all of you, and that's where it gets really fun and interesting. So I know that you have some questions in mind, and if not, you'll be listening closely so that you have some questions for our panelists. I'm very proud to have today's panelists here. Each of these students were in my classes at one point or another, and that's a great common history. Who knew that we also would someday share the history of working in automotive together? And that's what brings us together today. And so as for my part of the colloquium, I'm really just going to hopefully give voice to their experience and ask some interesting questions. I know that when I was a young person out in industry, my personal mentors said to me, if you can make it in automotive, you can make it anywhere. I had no idea what that meant. But today we're going to uncover some of that through the voices of our alumni. And so here we are to do that and to learn how they've made it in the industry. As the theme states, our students today are playing a huge role in the industry. They're working on designing and improving systems from one end of the vehicle to the other, whether that's a motorcycle, a truck, or a race car. And so let's go ahead and start off today's discussion with a little introduction. Maria, would you like to kick it off for us?
Sure. Hi, my name is Maria Krudikova. I graduated from Multidisciplinary Engineering with a concentration in General Engineering in May 2016, so almost 4 years ago. I'm currently a design engineer for Harley-Davidson Motor Company, working on the Pan America Adventure Touring Vehicle and the Bronx, which is a street fighter motorcycle. I'm working on the heat exchanger, so radiator system, also passenger grab handles and skid plate.
I'm Kalina Isaacson. I graduated from MDE with a concentration in general engineering back in May 2015. I currently work at General Motors, working on the steering systems of the full-size trucks. So that includes the Silverado, the Sierra, the big SUVs. I'm also working on the new battery electric truck that you might have heard about. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
My name is Alex Offenbach. I work for Andretti Autosport as a damper specialist on the Indy cars. Graduated from the MDE program with a concentration in general engineering. I graduated from Purdue with my dream job, actually, designing racetracks, but unfortunately couldn't do that forever, so moved to my other dream job, working to work in the Indy 500 one day.
Great, great. So that gives you a little background of everyone's experience, and so we'll dive right into the questions. Each of you individually kind of shared with me what you've been up to recently and how that fit into the automotive industry. For some of you, it was part of your family history. For some of you, it was part of your personal passion. And for some of you, you just wanted to design some really interesting things and get in and dig into the whole experience. So Maria, we'll start with you again. Sorry, you're my easy target at the end of the table. You were part of Formula SAE while you were here at Purdue. And so you obviously had a lot of early interest in automotive. But what I really want to know, and what I hope that the audience wants to know, is what is it about the automotive industry exactly that makes it a really solid career choice for multidisciplinary students or any student? And yeah, what's to be learned there?
Sure. I think the nature of my role in new product development is, by definition, very multidisciplinary. You know, you can't design a whole vehicle on your own. So day to day, I interact with the styling department, who kind of, you know, has this vision of what the full vehicle ends up looking like. You know, with finance, how much things are going to cost. With assembly, you know, is this even feasible to put together on the line? So getting to work with all these different stakeholders and balancing, you know, all of their requirements is really challenging, but also very fulfilling. And it really challenges me to, you know, wear many different hats, think about how I'm going to present different information to, you know, different audiences. You know, a styling person isn't going to want to know, you know, all the details about, you know, what my heat rejection values are for whatever size radiator. They're going to want to minimize the size of the radiator. So it's like, how do you communicate in a way that's palatable to all the different stakeholders in an effective manner? And I think multidisciplinary engineering sets you up to be that person that synthesizes and disseminates that information.
Great. Alex, I'm going to toss this one to you too. What do you think about the automotive industry makes it a great match for MD?
Well, I think the really unique thing about the automotive industry, and specifically the racing industry, is it takes people from every major, not even just engineering. So lots of different types of mindsets, lots of different skill sets. In my business, at least, it's everything from finding money, finding support, sponsors, all the way to how do we make this the best possible vehicle we can. And what I love about my specific position is how many different skills you need to bring to it. We have a mix of, on our team in the damper department, we have a mix of people with engineering backgrounds, mechanic backgrounds, and it really is, it just takes so much creativity. I mean, you need to think outside the box, because if you spend every day trying to optimize something, at some point you think you're out of ideas, but you know, then you know you I don't know, it's such a cool industry that it takes a special type of person too. I think there's a lot of travel, a lot of time that goes into it, but you get just such an interesting group of people with all different backgrounds, all different new ideas, and it is so fun and exciting to go to work every day, because you really never know what's going to get thrown at you.
I'm sure that's true in racing for sure. I can't even imagine. Now, Kalina, you've got a different experience, a little different background. You're a third-generation associate of General Motors. That's a long history for your family to be in automotive. So maybe you didn't even have a choice in your pathway. I don't know. But, you know, you're on the inside now. And so maybe you thought it was part of your tradition, but you had a choice. And you're there now. So what is it that makes being a design release engineer at General Motors something that you find interesting every morning to get out of bed for, beyond just the tradition of your family?
So honestly, going into it was kind of a dream to work at General Motors. I grew up there, you know, around that area my whole time, and I really looked up to, you know, people in my family that worked there. So it was kind of really cool. As a design release engineer, the role is really broad. I mean, you're dealing with, as Maria said, of any different aspect. I mean, you're dealing with assembly, the actual design, with finances, packaging space, and especially in, you know, building full-size trucks. We're building hundreds of vehicles every day at multiple assembly plants. So you have to have everything, you know, together and in order. And I kind of find that fun and challenging. I mean, it is challenging. It's stressful as heck, and I know my husband complains about that all the time, that I'm working at home, but like I have to, you know, everything's on the clock. And that kind of, it's a good stress, you know, but it's a good way to juggle and learn the different side of everything. And you really get to experience different roles. You know, if you don't like what you're doing right now, you can work in somebody else's shoes and try to understand how it works at the manufacturing plant or into the actual design part of the, you know, process. So it's interesting.
And so what did your family think about you entering into General Motors?
They were really excited for me, so it was really cool. I know my grandpa's my biggest role model, and he passed away when I was still a teenager, so I think he was the biggest push for me to get into this, and I think he'd be really proud of me.
I think you would be too. I think you would be too. So this is a question for all of you. As you know, we teach teamwork and engineering professionalism and habits of mind and a range of design perspectives both in first year and in multidisciplinary engineering all along your career. And then you also have all of your technical coursework, right, on top of that you get to choose from flexibly in MDE. That's kind of what makes us different. So as you think about the skills that you left Purdue with, and you think about kind of how companies looked at you when they were recruiting you and how you do your job every day, what do you think were some of the most important skills that you picked up along the way? Maybe think about the recruitment part and then think about your work part.
So one of the things that I think makes this program so amazing is just that, like I mentioned, the broad range of skills you go in with. So I was actually in a really unique position within my department, in that some days I'll be sitting there building the shocks, putting them together. Other days I'm up working with the engineers doing CAD drawings, or you know, working through that manufacturing process, because everything we do is made in-house. And so within the multidisciplinary engineering curriculum, to be able to take all those core classes that really help establish that Purdue engineering mindset that I think sets Purdue engineers apart from engineers from other universities, it was also really unique and really important to be able to come in with some of that hands-on and design experience as well. And that's, I think, what, at least in my experience, I think that's what's been the most important.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with everything that he said. I mean, I know when my manager hired me, he was very interested in the Purdue. You know, Purdue's known for engineering, but when I explained what multidisciplinary engineering was, and you know how I worked in epics a lot, so we did a lot of projects and DFMEAs, design failure mode effects analysis. I always thought those were, I don't know, kind of a waste of time in epics, but now I realize they are very important. They're honestly really interesting to analyze and use. So it's kind of neat that I could go into, you know, my first interview talking about that. My manager was just super impressed. And like, he's still impressed that I tell him I have experience with DFMEAs. That's really kind of funny. So yeah, the experience you get with the projects, especially in MDE, is a big deal.
I would agree as well with Kalina and Alex. I think overall, this program produces very well-rounded individuals where you have that you know, good core engineering fundamentals, but there's more to you than that as well. So hands-on skills, I pursued that kind of on my own. It was something I knew I wanted to do and wasn't really getting from the mechanical engineering department, and was able to take more manufacturing classes through the MDE program. And, you know, interviewing, it may, you know, you'll always get the, well, what is multidisciplinary engineering? But as soon as you explain it, the hiring managers, you know, 99% of the time, they're like, oh yeah, that's exactly what we're looking for. And skill-wise and my day-to-day job, I think communication is very important because kind of like I mentioned before, a lot of the role is just synthesizing, you know, a lot of stakeholders' viewpoints and communicating that back out effectively. A lot of my job is I'm on the phone with suppliers, you know, trying to take their design for manufacturing feedback and then, you know, digesting that and trying to make sure that the styling department's going to be on board with, you know, what the supplier is suggesting. So it's a lot of communication skills, I think, are going to be, they're going to make you very successful because a lot of engineering is, you know, communication and synthesizing that information and communicating it effectively to your audience.
Just out of curiosity, how many of you would have said in IDE 301 when you were in my class that you believe that communication would be your #1 skill that you would go to work with and use every day? By show of hands. Notice, no one believed me in 301.
Makes sense now.
It makes sense now, which is good.
Engineers
right?
aren't good at talking. Why would we communicate?
So, you know, education is a long play process, right? It's important to think about it over the long haul, so that's really good. We have a lot of students in the audience, as you know, from my class. And so in retrospect, if there was something that you wish you had considered, not including communication, but maybe some other skills that you might have desired to pick up or other things to think about in preparation for your professional life, what might those be? That in retrospect, you're like, oh yeah, I kind of missed out on that, or I really wish I would have spent more time learning about that.
I hate to admit it, but engineering statistics are so important, and I actually, I found my book and I like reference it all the time now because you have to test your, you know, vehicles to a certain number of miles, and depending on how many samples you have, that changes how long you have to test them. And I was just really amazed at, it's like, oh wow, I really should have paid more attention.
I would agree with that. That's a good point. As a general thing, I think like time management skills and stuff, I never really tried to work on that while I was in college, but it's such a big deal when you're in the industry and you're working in high stress situations. You have to know how to manage your workload and attack the important things first, and get things done in an appropriate manner.
I promise they didn't pay me to say this, but I actually visited campus a couple weeks ago, or a couple months ago, talked to Professor P. She asked me the same question. And I took the first-year engineering classes about 7 years ago now, and they taught us MATLAB, and they kept telling us, you'd use this again, you'd use this again. I got through the rest of college, graduated, had never touched MATLAB again. About a month ago, I realized I really, really wish I would have learned MATLAB and really retained it. You know, but it's not necessarily the programming language itself. It's just the thought process behind coding. We do so much of it. And because I don't even have that great foundation, it's really hard for me to pick up. I spent all of winter break on my laptop in my free time trying to learn it, and it is so difficult at this point. I really wish I had a whole classroom of peers to bounce ideas off of and try to figure it out. But yeah, they really do mean it when they say this will come in handy one day. So,
thank you, Alex.
Yeah, no problem.
I will give you $5 later for that comment. So I would be remiss if I didn't highlight the fact that there are 2 females here and 1 male, and we're talking about an industry that is often considered a very male-dominated industry. And so, at the risk of going out on a limb here, what are some insights to my 2 female panelists that they might want to share with us, right? Advice for young women or men who are interested in going into the industry.
I would definitely have to say, as a young engineer, just trying to prove myself in the industry, and then also being a minority, I definitely put a lot of pressure upon myself to kind of know everything, because I'm like fresh out of school, all the equations are fresh, so I felt the need to, be the subject matter expert, not just in my product line and what I was working on, but kind of all the other stuff that comes with it. And my biggest piece of advice is to ask questions and lean on your technical experts. So, when you're being asked to look at over mold flow analysis, or would you recommend a nylon 6 or a nylon 6.6 for this part, like, you're going to have advanced manufacturing engineers. You're going to be working with materials engineers, and, don't spend a lot of time doing this nitty-gritty research when all it takes is an email, a Skype message, sitting on someone's desk, and just asking the questions that they're the technical experts of. And then eventually you'll find that, everyone else will have their area, but you're going to find your own area that you're going to be the expert in, and people are going to be coming to you with those, nitty-gritty technical questions. So take the pressure off, take a breather. You don't need to know everything, but surround yourself with the people that do. Always aim to be, the dumbest person in the room. Surround yourself with smarter people, and they'll lift you up and they'll help make you successful.
Yeah, I would, similar experience. I know when I got into General Motors, it's a massive company, and I know I was really intimidated by it. As a young female engineer, especially, my group is entirely, I think there's one other female engineer, yeah. So it's really hard, and these people have been in the industry for forever, so they know everything, and they expect you to go in there and they hand you stuff and you're supposed to make it through. And so the one joke at General Motors is that we have so many acronyms, we can speak whole sentences in acronyms, and that's like one of the biggest hurdles is, they know everything already, so they'll start throwing the stuff at you and you literally don't understand the words they're saying. So that's, one big thing to work through is just that communication. And then learning, after you learn that, you have to learn the processes and then learning who to talk to. And so it is a big deal to network and communicate and ask the questions. And I know I didn't ask questions initially. I was too scared to. I just didn't know what to ask, really. And then once I learned a little more and got into it, learning how to ask the right questions is important.
Alrighty. Alex, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I mentioned earlier that my mentor said to me, if you can make it in automotive, you can make it anywhere. What do you suppose that meant? And definitely, what does it mean in your industry, in the racing sector, where it's so competitive at every level, on every dimension? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, and it goes a level further, because I think racing in particular is so grueling, so unique. There's nothing like it. And you also, we're always around the same people. We travel with the same people. We're in hotels. You go to dinner. So the people you work with, it's more than just your coworkers. You see them so often, and that on top of the workload, you just have these really special relationships with the people you work with, and some, it's not just coworkers. You find a lot of mentors, and I think, I've never worked in the customer automotive world, but I think that the challenges that the automotive industry presents are just so different, especially in IndyCar, because everything happens so quickly. Like, if we had a race at Austin, and you go in with a game plan, and the first lap of practice our engine blows. So now we lost 2 practice sessions because of it. It's like that whole plan went out the door. So now we had 30 minutes to prepare for the whole rest of the weekend, basically, 30 minutes of on-track time. So your testing plan, it's the same as any engineering project. You have goals, things you want to try, trial, react to that. So to have all those kinds of things just condensed on just like a snap, it's crazy. So I just think that on your toes, you still have to accomplish all the same things you set out to, but suddenly in a fraction of the time, the adaptations you have to make are just, I don't know. There's not even a word to describe it. So I don't know. I almost feel like another job would be a cakewalk sometimes compared to the snap decisions and the amount we need to fit into such a small amount of time.
Maria and Kalina, do you have any additional comments about if you can make it in automotive, and kind of how this experience you feel has prepared you for future success?
I think the time pressure is definitely very real. The launch dates don't move out. The marketing team, starts showing off prototypes and bikes, and then you are on the hook for delivering. And it's not just you and your subsystem. Even if I do my job perfectly, if one of my coworkers that's responsible for something else doesn't get that done, like, we don't have a vehicle. So there's a lot of teamwork involved, and definitely working under the pressure of time. I think on average, our development cycles are 2 years from, concept all the way through delivery, which really isn't a lot of time when you consider the entirety of the design process to have to go through that for a full vehicle, and then all the logistics, the lead times for your suppliers to make your parts and then put them together and hopefully have something that works at the end. But it's definitely worth it. It's so cool, after your product launches, to be able to point to it and say, hey, I made that.
That is the most rewarding part of it, I think, is saying I made that. Like, we just, me and my husband just bought a Silverado, and I work on that. I released the steering column on that, and it's really cool to say, yeah, I know that there's problems that I've worked on through the whole process to fix, and I'm really hoping nothing shows up on ours. But, it's a challenge, and I really love it. And the problem solving is my favorite part of it. And the fact that we are under such a time crunch. Last fall I had to go down to our Arlington, Texas plant like 4 times, and a couple of them were back to back. As I was leaving, I got another call. There was an issue, so I had to come back the next week. And it's just a lot of fun, I think. Working on those problems in such a time crunch, and once it's over, you're like, wow, I made it through that, but I learned so much. And I think, as Alex said, it would be a cakewalk in anything else.
You mentioned kind of the under time pressure, right? And I refer to that as the cadence of practice, right? It has a certain pace that's so different than what you have at school. Mm-hmm. So what would prepare students to be ready for that sort of time crunch, that cadence of practice that makes you deliver beyond what you think you're capable of, right? Under pressure. What could we do?
Definitely getting yourself involved with a hands-on experience. I definitely attribute a lot of my success to my time with Formula SAE, because you are going through the full design process in, a 9 to 12 month period of time. So, whether it's Formula or Baja or Epics or, even just getting a job working in the machine shop, anything where you get to kind of experience and touch different parts of the design process, or even better, the entirety of the design process, is going to set you up for success.
One thing I was really involved in was the Purdue Grand Prix, and also the electric vehicle Grand Prix. And the Purdue Grand Prix, it's a lot bigger of an event, a lot more people to rely on. But I think what really helped me was the electric version, where it's not as widely known. It's a really cool event. It happens at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So going there for me, that was looking through a little sight glass, hoping man, I hope I can do this on the big time one day. But what a lot of people don't know, and I'm probably not supposed to say, is most of that work comes together in the last week. As Maria said, the product launches don't move. We booked the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. They're not going to move it for us if we don't get done. And so, working through whatever you have to do, whatever lengths you have to go to make sure that your product, in their case, or in my case, my go-kart was ready and running, properly, and then also the competitive nature of me. I don't want it to just run. I want it to run well. And that was just something that set me up, I think, so well. It was like a seamless transition. But the advice to the students in here, I would say definitely get involved in something, even if it's not necessarily a project-based student organization, but I think to get the most, I think I learned as much in my time with the motorsports at Purdue and Grand Prix and EV Grand Prix organizations. I think I learned equally as much there as I did through my in-classroom experiences. I just think you're missing out on that extra opportunity to grow.
Yeah, one of my experiences here that really helped, and it wasn't even an academic, was I was a student manager at Wiley Dining Court by the time I graduated. I worked my way up. I started as an associate, And I think that was a really helpful experience because of the dining court. I mean, like, you have waves that come in, right? And you got to, like, attack that. And it's a good time management skills and learning how to work as a team and just making it through the shift. But, you know, it is good at management and, you know, dealing with problems like the dish machine broke all the time, you know. So having to fix that. And it's helpful when you're an engineer because you can kind of help fix things. So, you know, even things outside of the classroom are really helpful.
Great. That's excellent. We were talking at lunchtime about generational differences of engineers, and I'm sure you experienced some of those at your work. We know that, you know, millennials tend to have different work habits and different values and different ways of doing things, and they also have a very strong philanthropic thread that runs through their mindset. So what would be some of the values that you see in your firms that really help support those millennial values that, you know, that you found very attractive or that you currently find very attractive in automotive? Because sometimes, you know, people think that different types of industries aren't right for certain types of generations. What would you say to them?
I can go ahead and kick this one off. So I guess I have two things to add. The first one, maybe more lighthearted. The dress code at Harley is freedom of personal expression. And I think it's because they would have to fire like half the workforce because of their beards and tattoos. So what I'm wearing now is pretty much what I get to wear to work. And I love that I'm valued, you know, for my brain and what I can contribute versus, you know, the clothes that I'm wearing or what I look like on a day-to-day basis. So that's very cool, very helpful to my wallet, not needing to spend a ton of money on dress clothes. And then I guess more seriously is Harley forces us to do a personal development plan. So a yearly goal setting activity where we can kind of look back, reflect on what we did, you know, to meet company goals, but then also what we're doing for our personal goals. So it's pretty much get asked every year, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? Which is awesome because they support your personal and, you know, professional development goals. And one of mine happens to be student outreach. So I love coming back to Purdue, doing events like this, volunteering with groups like the Boys and Girls Club, and you know, mentoring young middle school girls on like, hey, this is what engineering is. You can totally do this. This is an option for you when you grow up. So having a company that supports, you know, some of the extra, you know, not just getting the job done, but supporting you as a human and, you know, your personal and professional endeavors, I think is really important.
Yeah, General Motors is a similar, you know, career setting kind of thing, and that really does help. And I know they're still developing, and every year it changes because they find new ways to, you know, to really talk to, you know, from your manager level to you, and set your goals and really excel. And also GM is big in helping the community, the whole philanthropic thing. I mean, GM has this whole week where they encourage you to go out into the community, and we help, especially downtown Detroit, as you know, it's Detroit. There are still not great areas of it. And so we go out there and we help clean up the community. We help out in food banks and repairing houses and all that. It's really great, and it helps. It feels good to me, you know, that I'm not just spending my time working on stuff and making vehicles and all that. I'm also, you know, working with the people that we, you know, these people might even work in our facilities and all that. So it's kind of neat to actually touch their lives.
Right. So this is our lightning round, okay? In a word or just a few words, what do we look forward to in the automotive sector in your part of the world? What should we be thinking about in terms of advancements or technology, sustainability, design? In a word or two, what do we have to look forward to?
Electrification.
You stole mine. Electrification and autonomy.
Autonomy.
If we were autonomous, we'd all be out of jobs. But in our industry, I don't know. There's some all electric series. I don't know if we'll ever go all electric, but in IndyCar at least, I know hybrid technology is the big talk right now.
Okay. I'm getting the high sign that it's now your turn to participate in our colloquium. So Who would like to be first to ask some questions? You can come right up to the mic. Yes, you have to be on the mic because we have a live streaming video going on, so we want to make sure all of our participants can hear.
I'll bite. Tell me more about autonomy as someone who is a kind of a driving enthusiast. I have a recent car, and it's turning into the nanny state.
That
How
is
are
true.
You looking at that?
I love driving too. So the autonomous thing is like, oh, I don't want my car to drive for me. But it's fascinating. The technology is really fascinating. I mean, we've implemented Super Cruise on our Cadillacs, and that's really cool. It has like a sensor on your steering wheel. It actually watches your eyes to make sure you're paying attention, so you can't do the Tesla trick of hanging an orange off your steering wheel. But so it's fun. I drove one on our highway near us for I think it was 30 miles, and it was really nerve-wracking, but it was cool because you get to watch it, and it you can see how it thinks. It pays attention to the other cars and how it processes, and it's fun thinking of the challenges as an engineer because you know that it's not perfect and that we're not perfect either, but that's kind of part of the challenge is that the computer has to predict human actions. So it's fascinating.
Hi, I have a question about teamwork. So in MDE, in your position, you have to work with different stakeholders, different engineering departments, different not engineering departments like finances, marketing, design, art, stuff like that. So my question is, how do you address the differences that you guys have in, highly time constrained setting, in normal setting, or in research or new product?
So, I mean, team is in my company, or our company's name. But yeah, that's actually a great question. It's challenging. One thing that I was really surprised about is there's a definite a divide between the engineers and the mechanics in auto racing, because as auto racing is becoming much more technology driven, it's a lot more about looking into the data, the telemetry, than it is about what can you do with tinkering with the parts. And so in my position now, I'm a little bit of a mix of both, and so it's a really unique position to be in. But it's really kind of the way you approach it. I think I'm really lucky, with especially coming, not even to a shameless plug, but within the MDE department, I think you get a little taste of all of that, and so I think I feel like I'm in a good position where, depending on who you're approaching, you have to know the way you want to approach that problem, that issue. You mentioned the business people. Sometimes, they almost work independently of us, but sometimes we do have to mix, and because we're not just representing our company, we're also representing a sponsor or a product or something that their name is plastered all over everything we have. So when you have guests at the track, it doesn't matter whether you're having a good day or a bad day. They're who, at the end of the day, pays your salary. So though you have to treat them, like their royalty. But I told a funny story in the nest earlier. We actually lost a sponsor after we got to the racetrack once. So whereas sometimes, we don't have any interaction with the business people, now we, as engineers, mechanics, it doesn't matter who you were, we were peeling stickers off the car, off the truck, making sure, looking through the old bag of team shirts and fire suits to make sure we had things that didn't have, their name on it. So, it's a mix. It's crazy sometimes the amount of, the lengths you'll go to just with the mix of the different departments.
And I think just keeping in mind that we're all working towards the same goal at the end, we're all trying to build a vehicle that is profitable, that consumer is going to enjoy driving. And having that little bit of empathy, when the styling guy says, oh, hey, your design's pretty ugly, it's try not to take it personally and, focusing more on what you can do, knowing that, hey, the styling department is, they're the face of the vehicle. So, and that's what sells. So keeping, some of those other perspectives in mind and knowing that you're working towards the same goal.
Anything? No? Next question.
Yeah, I couldn't help but notice you were all concentration in general engineering. And I was wondering kind of what was your logic in choosing that, and if you found it to be one of your strengths actually to choose general versus any of the other disciplinaries.
Sure. So I actually started out mechanical engineering and ended up switching to multidisciplinary engineering because I kind of knew or started figuring out what I wanted to do with new product development, and hated that I was so boxed in with, you know, only 3 options for classes with mechanical engineering, none of them being in what I wanted to do. So I really enjoyed the flexibility of general engineering because I could get my engineering degree and take classes that I thought were relevant, like manufacturing, for example. I got so much benefit out of taking, you know, manufacturing classes. So I think general was an advantage because it was so broad that I could kind of pick and choose the classes that I thought would give me a leg up.
Yeah, I also started in mechanical and transferred over, and it was the same kind of reasons. Like I was not getting any joy out of classes I was taking, and it was kind of dreadful, especially all the math classes. And so it was good to get into the, you know, MD and general engineering and just choosing what I wanted to take and what I was actually interested in, and what ultimately does help me in my career.
Next question.
I want to know how you guys all address failure in a professional setting, because I know you guys have a lot of pressure on you at every single moment.
So you learn from every failure, and I think that's like the best part of the job, honestly. Like I said before, I like problem solving. It was probably my favorite part of the job. And yeah, that does mean there's failures along the way, but you learn every time. And so especially at General Motors, we focus on there's different ways to problem solve. So like we do this Red X process, which is a big one, or DFSS is design based. But those are just interesting ways to address your failures and like I said, learning from them.
Ultimately, you know, you have to deliver a complete vehicle to your consumer, and sometimes there's multiple iterations along the way, and you iterate through failure, and you know, everyone's working towards the same goal, and even if you mess something up, like they won't let you fall all the way to rock bottom. Good example is I had ordered my radiator hoses, but I kicked off the tooling to the wrong model. So we were building up 2 vehicles. One of them had the correct routed hose. One of them did not. It was too short, like it physically would not work. And it's like, okay, cool, you messed up, now what? And I think it's that critical moment of, well, what do you do now? Like, you created a problem. What do? We solve problems. How do you fix this problem? And, you know, I'm like, oh, well, this hose is routed close enough. Let's just have the supplier ship us more of this hose. We'll maybe trim it a bit. We'll make it work, and then, you know, get the right tool and tool it up correctly. So I think, you know, everyone messes up. It happens. But if you're surrounded by people that have also been in your shoes and, you know, have also messed up, they know what it's like. They know what happens, especially when you're working in that fast-paced environment and things get missed and, you know, you kick off the wrong model. But it's what you do afterwards and how you mitigate and approach that problem.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome question. You know, in racing, there's a lot of different ways to fail. One of them could be, you know, your driver puts it in the wall, you know, and you put a lot of time into it, you know, but you can also be something mechanical, or maybe you know, I hold myself to a high standard. I made a mistake at one point, you know, and if you think it's the end of the world, you know, even at one point in the season, our car we finished dead last in the Indy 500, biggest race in the world, 10 miles into it. You know, we're stopped on track, and you feel terrible in that moment. But I think the most important thing is every time that we fail, we learn from it. And in some cases, it's not just correcting it. You even get better than you were, and you know, you learn new things, you know, like I said, I guess you don't, if one solution didn't work, you still you still want to not just correct it, but you want to make it better. And sometimes some of the best failures, you realize like, wow, like maybe let me put it this way: if it's a process failure, maybe it wasn't the intended result, but it could be better. And that's kind of the fun. Those are the fun ones. But just you have to bounce back, definitely. I mean, you don't hang your head. Think about it as an opportunity to learn.
Any other questions?
I'll jump in a quick one. Thank you all for coming. You all talked about how electrification or hybrid technology is sort of the watchword of where your industry is going. Can you say something about how your industry or how your companies talk with you about the climate crisis and how you think about the sort of obligation to cut climate emissions by 50% in 10 years? Like, how do you think about that in your day-to-day practice? Thanks.
I think with motorcycles and with riding, Harley has a big sustainability push because a lot of the experience of our vehicles, those winding roads through the mountains and the forests, along the coastline, like that's what's in jeopardy. The earth is part of the riding experience and, having your senses open to it. So there definitely is a push with all of our plastic components, for example, like they all get recycling codes, and in parts and accessories, we especially take a look at, okay, so this customer is bolting off this one piece of the vehicle, like they're just gonna chuck it or throw it away, like to snap this new shiny piece on, and we're definitely mindful of that and try to be strategic to make sure that nothing goes to waste. And then with emissions and with electrification, I think it's a great opportunity to, just make a smaller environmental impact and help preserve our planet for future generations of riders to enjoy.
I think working on the full-size trucks is a huge one for environmental. I mean, those are not very fuel efficient. So the whole battery electric truck, which is coming up soon, is a big deal, and I think that's really important. And because people usually associate batteries and hybrids and stuff to boring cars, like a Prius or whatever else. So
not to name examples.
Sorry if everybody likes the Prius. No, but people don't always expect performance or anything out of those. They're for environmental purposes. So it's kind of fun to take those applications and make it something like a battery electric truck that can off-road or it can tow things for 300 miles or something. Like that's impressive, and it's kind of exciting to work on that. So it's kind of making environmentalism I don't know. It's kind of fun. So, and then I know too from an assembly point, a lot of our assembly plants, they kind of brag that they're landfill free. They try to, if they have any components that come in with plastic clips or other assembly aids, that those are recycled or those are returned to the supplier to recycle or something like that. They really try to minimize waste at every source.
Yeah, I'm not going to stand here and say that we don't burn through 10 sets of tires per car per weekend, but I don't think racing is very specifically like let's go green-minded, but one of the really cool things that we get to do in racing is we get to prove technology. The Indy 500 was created in 1911 to prove the reliability of motorized vehicles. So our push to hybrid technology, and that's really manufacturer-driven. That's not us saying, hey, we'd really like to put batteries and motors on these things, because we really don't. It's simple. It's nice and simple how it is now. We don't have to learn new skills, but what the manufacturers really want is they want us to put those on our cars, and they want us to prove to the public that not only are they reliable, but if you put them on an Indy car, it's now like Kalina said, it could be cool, and so that's really where the push is. It's
changing that consumer perspective of, hey, this product is super cool, it's super high performance. Oh, and by the way, it's green.
Any other questions? One more, looks like. One more.
This will be the last question.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I've never met any of you before, but a lot of you talked about a lot of the stress, the last-minute timing, the kind of hair-on-fire mentality. How do you manage that work-life balance? What do you do to keep sane?
you work out a lot and just stress, take all that stress out. But yeah, thank you for the question. I don't know you at all. But you really work with, I mean, your group knows, you know, the people you work with know that there is a necessity for work-life balance. They have families and important things to do too. So it's really working with your team and having that understanding and communication. And, you know, sometimes you do have to work late, and hopefully, you know, your family understands, but it's just communication is big.
I think the end result sometimes just makes it worth it, where, you know you're putting in the long nights, but, you know, at the end you'll be able to look back upon it and say, like, wow, I really contributed. Like, I helped make, you know, this part of this product. And also just day-to-day work, you know, not every day in engineering is glamorous. Sometimes it's paperwork and test incident reports and DFMEAs, but I think the nature of our industry is that is balanced and offset by test track days. I spent a week in Phoenix, you know, in the middle of November when it's cold out here, you know, riding motorcycles in the desert. So just having those things to look forward to when, you know, your job is also kind of a passion project for you really offsets, you know, some of the stressful or boring or, you know, what have you days.
Yeah, it kind of, I'll build upon what you said. It's really hard to describe a feeling, but like we work a lot. I mean, that's not even sugarcoating it. We work a lot, and I working weekends, going to the tracks. Like I'm missing friends' weddings, like best friends, like that I met here at Purdue. You know, you spend 4 years with them, and then you're not even there to like for their biggest day. But in that moment, when we were lucky enough to win 2 races last year, like when in that moment, just all feels okay. You know, you kind of forget about it and it's like, that's what we do it for. I mean, there's really no like, I don't know. It's not, sometimes I struggle. Like we don't like, what do we contribute? Because we're just kind of, we park our cars in the same spot they were after 500 miles. But when you win, and it is the best feeling in the world. And it's like that moment where all the hard work pays off. Like the whole journey from you know, all the way through school, all the work, you know, every day, you know, just, I don't know, there's nothing like it.
I think that's a good place to wrap up today's colloquium. Can we give all of our panelists a round of applause for their efforts? I would be remiss if I didn't thank Harley-Davidson, General Motors, and Andretti Motor, I guess now it's called Autosport, for sharing their time and talent with us today. That concludes our colloquium, so thank you for coming. Thanks for being a part of our event, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.